This will be our last chapter. We're going to go up through 2008. And the theme is going to be globalization, which offers both dangers and a great deal of promise. Bill Clinton, elected in 1992, is the first Democrat in the White House in 12 years. Republicans make the claim that he has no mandate, and so he can't really enact anything that they don't agree with. Their argument is because it was a three-way race, he didn't win a majority, he only won a plurality of the popular vote. Although they will argue the exact opposite when George Bush fails to win a majority of the vote 8 years later. The Democratic majority in both houses of Congress, it is a majority, but it is slim. And conservative Democrats will often team up with Republicans to oppose a lot of Clinton's, particularly his social legislation. And Clinton is also going to be plagued by his own personal recklessness. He has a checkered past. There's a series of affairs in his past, evidently, and he is prone to take big risks in his personal life, as we're going to see. The Republicans will launch a massive resistance to Clinton. They will demonize and vilify him even before he gets the nomination, really, in a way that is kind of new in modern American politics at this time. One of the first things Clinton tries to accomplish is to allow gay people to serve in the military. And he doesn't get this done, really. He gets a compromise we call Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which says that gay people can serve in the military, but if it's found out they're gay, they can be thrown out for being gay. But theoretically, the military is not allowed to ask, and if you admit that you're gay, you can be thrown out. So as long as nobody brings it up, you can be gay in the military all you want. This was never a great policy, but the problem is, as we moved into an age of social networking here in the last 4 or 5 years, it became much easier for people to go on somebody's Facebook page or Instagram or whatever and figure out who is gay and then throw them out. But fortunately for supporters of gay rights, this policy is going to be undone by Congress and President Obama in 2012. The Senate will filibuster all of Clinton's, or virtually all of Clinton's appointments. They will use the filibuster, that is the refusal to end debate in the Senate, which makes Senate action take 60 votes instead of the traditional 51. They will begin to use the filibuster at previously unimagined levels. They will use it all the time. When Republicans gain control of Congress in 1994, they will launch an endless series of investigations into almost every aspect of Clinton's public and personal life. None of these turn up any wrongdoing whatsoever, except for an affair Clinton had with an intern, which we'll get to later. But we spent billions of dollars and reassigned a great deal of our intelligence apparatus to investigate Bill Clinton's political and personal doings during the 90s because the Republicans were so determined to try to get some sort of scandal on him. In Clinton's first year in office, he raised taxes on the rich and cut taxes on the poor. He dramatically cut government spending, particularly military spending, and he will begin to reduce the deficit. That is to say, the difference between the amount of money we take in taxes and what we spend as a government. And in Clinton's budgets, beginning in really his 1993 budget, which is passed without a single Republican vote, will go on to balance the budget for the first time since 1969 and begin to reduce the massive debts that had spiraled out of control under Reagan and Bush. Republicans like to try to take credit for this, but the reality is every single Republican voted against the budget that accomplished that. Free trade will become a major issue. Bill Clinton will push free trade agreements, particularly with our neighbors. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Association, makes it easier to move goods between Mexico, the United States, and Canada. GATT, the General Agreement on Trades and Tariffs, will make it significantly easier to trade among countries around the world. NAFTA will come under a lot of criticism over time, and free trade in general will certainly have its opponents. The argument on the plus side is it increases trade between countries, which is generally good for GDP growth. But critics will argue that it fuels unethical business practices around the world where workers are maybe not being paid very well or working in terrible, dangerous conditions. And of course, kind of American economic nationalists will point out that it makes it easier for manufacturing jobs to leave the United States and flow into our neighbors. Bill Clinton, since Lady Bird, really, it had become the standard practice for a first lady to take on one particular issue. Now, these had always been non-controversial things, generally. Lady Bird was beautification and planting wildflowers. Betty Ford, I forget what Pat Nixon was doing, but Betty Ford famously talked about addiction as a disease and promoted the idea of treatment centers for people who have substance abuse problems. Nancy Reagan had been the force behind Just Say No to Drugs. So things that there was generally consensus on. But Hillary Clinton, who was an attorney and a capable woman, well-educated woman in her own right, will be put in charge of trying to reform health care. And there will be a massive pushback from the Republicans on this. The Republicans will, ironically, as a counterproposal, propose what essentially becomes the health care plan that Obama signs into law, what's commonly and I think mistakenly called Obamacare. So they will turn against their own proposal later. But one of the first major fights of the Clinton administration is on health care reform. The insurance companies pour enormous amounts of money into advertising and lobbying to kill any sort of healthcare reform in 1993, and they succeed in ending these attempts to reform healthcare. The collapse of the Soviet Union had created chaos in much of the former Eastern Europe, who had been, after all, Soviet puppet states. One of these will be Yugoslavia, which dissolves into a number of smaller countries based on nationalistic identities. In a new republic called Bosnia, a civil war will break out between the Muslims and the Bosnian Muslims and the Christian Serbs. Genocide will pop up here with the Christians trying to kill all the Muslims in that country. In 1995, the really remarkable American diplomat Richard Holbrooke, he's up there in the top right, will get a peaceful partition of Bosnia between the Christian Serbs and the Muslims in the area. And this will be a great foreign policy victory, ultimately, for Clinton.